The moment I got home, I immediately looked up Annihilation and Buddhism, which even with my casual knowledge of the religion seemed obvious. To my surprise, I found nothing linking them together, but I did find a lot of people talking about the word annihilation in the context of Buddhism, so maybe I wasn't completely off base. I'm going to explain how they're related in a bit, but first, what is this video about? Today, I want to explain why I think the film Annihilation is the perfect allegory for many Buddhist ideas, and specifically that of no self or ego death. For the uninitiated, Annihilation is about a group of military scientists that enter a quarantined area of forest called the Shimmer due to its shimmering boundary. Within this area, they struggle with the mutating landscapes and creatures, but also their own minds that are vulnerable to whatever force is affecting the rest of the area. A quick note, in a movie that is overflowing with narrative and visual beauty, it's easy to derive meaning and make connections because beauty elicits certain reactions in all of us. The following is my interpretation of the rare movie that gives us amazing spectacle, but also gives us space to fill in the blanks. Usually, I try my best to find what the director or writer intended when watching these movies. This is one of the rare cases where I watched a film and had a very distinct interpretation that's not corroborated by the original author or director, but I'm going to lay out all the reasons why I think this is a really cool way to look at this film. Spoiler alert, the following contains heavy spoilers. While I talk, please enjoy some behind the scenes footage of this film, Annihilation. First, let's talk about the more obvious parallels, mainly what the Shimmer is doing, which is combining nature and man and different animals into each other. There's a lot of different schools of thought, and I won't be able to speak on all of them, but generally, Buddha believed in the interconnectedness of all beings. This is further highlighted by the idea of reincarnation, where on death you will come back as another creature depending on your behavior in this life. In Annihilation, it's implied Josie literally turned into a tree, and all of the animals are interconnected, not just spiritually, but within their DNA. Within the Shimmer, the characters are also experiencing memory issues. They lose track of time, not able to remember how long they've been in the Shimmer, and they also lose themselves, becoming progressively more confused. This is like the chaos and impermanence of our thoughts that through meditation we are able to better witness. For the layperson that doesn't meditate, it is very hard to be present, to actually objectively see your thoughts for what they are. Whether we're at work, at home, even out with friends, it's very easy to go through the motion, and every once in a while you have that feeling of being present, of becoming awake. Just like the characters when they first wake up at camp, you suddenly wonder, where has all the time gone? But all of us experience this time warp when we sleepwalk through the mundanity of modern life. Now, before I get further into the film, let's talk about what nirvana is. In Buddhism, nirvana is the state of being enlightened, and an enlightened individual is just someone who no longer feels desire, and therefore no longer feels suffering. Suffering is different from pain. You can still experience pain, happiness, and all these other feelings, but you just don't let them affect you. Now that's obviously very, very hard. But one interesting side effect or correlation of being enlightened would be that you no longer have an ego, because as long as you're holding on to your perception of yourself, even if you are a good person, that's still an opportunity for suffering. If you cannot live up to the standards you set for yourself or how other people see you, you will suffer. So back to when I googled Buddhism and Annihilation. Someone on a random Reddit thread had asked, if you were truly enlightened, what's so bad about annihilation of oneself, aka suicide? To simplify, if you were to achieve true nirvana in your lifetime, why not just end it? Because if all of the things that make up our reality leads to our suffering and is essentially an illusion, a prison of our own making made up of our desires, then why go on? That's an oversimplification, but spoiler alert, it's very, very hard to become enlightened. That's why there's only one Buddha, and that's why that's not a problem anyone should dwell on for too long. Hypothetically, you shouldn't dwell on anything. In the film, our main character is Lena. She goes into the shimmer along with 4 other women, knowing there is certain danger and probably death. They all reassure each other that they aren't committing suicide, but based on the fact that no one else except one person has safely returned, they are lying to themselves. So what makes these women so willing to go? In Buddhist philosophy, all of us suffer because we cannot let go of the past. That's tied to a desire to change our past. Lena feels sorry for cheating on her husband, Shepard has a deceased child, and Josie is clinically depressed. These characters' pain points are obvious, but for all of us, we have things that we are dealing with, and it's filled with pain. It's filled with dwelling, thinking about things we could have done. We even suffer for things that are out of our control, such as our biochemical disposition. Now, most of us, if we're healthy, we don't want to kill ourselves like these characters do, but every time we conjure up these ghosts from our pasts, we are like Josie who's cutting herself, except instead of a physical knife and blood, we are mentally reopening wounds as we relive these things that we cannot change. The following is an idea that's been explored by countless philosophers, and we're not going to figure it out now, but according to this film, free will is an illusion, and Lena is not at fault for cheating on her husband, even though most of us would intuitively say that's definitely on her. Also, who would ever cheat on Oscar Isaac? But this idea of choice is annihilated when there is the conversation between Lena and Dr. Ventress. When Lena's feeling guilty and Dr. Ventress says, "This is beyond you because this is biology." She says there's something in our cells that causes us to die because they're imperfect. And on the macro level, we as humans also run towards death and ruin, even when things are going good. This was the part where I began formulating my take on this movie, because that's a pretty strong statement. Basically, Lena is not culpable for cheating. It's an innate programming of self-destruction. So what does Buddhism have to say about that? Well, not nearly as much as Western philosophy. In order to have free will, it assumes that you have a self. Buddhism asserts that there is a constant changing idea of yourself, and I'm going to get into that now as we talk about that ending. And now we get to the climax of the movie, where we get a beautiful visual representation of ego death. At the end of the film, Lena goes down a dark hole where she meets an alien force that becomes a humanoid figure. It mirrors her until it eventually becomes her. This is all after she watches the video of her husband losing his mind and literally thinking another person is himself. He doesn't know who he is anymore. He's lost his sense of self. This is the idea of no self, which is something people have experienced through either years of Vipassana meditation or certain psychedelics. Within Buddhism, the phenomena of no self arises when you become a master at witnessing your moment-to-moment thoughts, and as you're witnessing and digging deeper, you start to feel like there is nothing there beyond your thoughts. Let me elaborate. Earlier, I referred to the chaos of the mind that most of us can relate to. Sometimes it's telling you you suck. Sometimes it's reminding you to get certain groceries. Other times it's taking you to super dark places you didn't want to go, but you're helpless. But are those thoughts you're having moment to moment who you are? That's absurd, right? You feel like you are something beyond that noise, coming up with the thoughts. And the Buddhist tradition agrees with you. You are not your thoughts. Now the scary thing is, practitioners of meditation have spent their whole lives observing their thoughts, trying to understand consciousness, and once they dug deeper to try to witness the thinker of their thoughts, they found nothing. Does that make sense? It shouldn't. Years of evolution have built an ego that wants to survive and believe it exists, but intellectually, the idea is, while your body and your brain might exist, you, the thinker of the thoughts, don't actually exist. Beyond the constant dialogue we have with an illusion of ourselves, there is no true self underneath that. All we ever were is that first layer of white noise, that stream of intrusive thoughts we have no control over, according to Buddhist philosophy and insights from Vipassana meditation. And that's what this film seems to be showing us through Lena and her dancing humanoid reflection. Both Lena and her husband see themselves, but they realize who they thought they were wasn't them. Just like we all have an image of who we are, but that's not necessarily us. It's just an illusion, a temporary idea of ourselves that we've clung onto, sometimes for far too long. As long as there is attachment to things that are unstable, unreliable, changing, and impermanent, there will be suffering. When Lena reunites with her husband, we think she is her original self. They say very little to each other, only admitting that things are different now. They both went on this journey to find themselves. Instead, they found a dark, cavernous hole that contained something they did not recognize. In the final shot, they hold each other, and we see the shifting glimmer in their eyes, representing their change in perspective, having seen the true nature of reality. And for the first time, they seem happy, like a weight has been lifted, because they left all of that baggage of their old selves in the lighthouse. So what's the overarching point? If I could sum it up, I would say change is inevitable. In this movie, everything is changing, from the relationships to the biomolecular level, and it's scary. The terrifying creatures that our protagonists have to fight in the Shimmer are like the inner demons everyone has to deal with day to day. And precisely because they are hard to deal with, if you mess up like all of our flawed characters do, you don't actually have to kill yourself or walk into the Shimmer. Because that person you don't like staring back at you in the mirror, it's just an illusion. And at any given moment, you have the opportunity to completely reinvent yourself, or at least the perception of yourself. Or maybe there's no difference. Those are my thoughts. Again, I don't think this is the intended interpretation, but I think it's a really, really cool one. If you've seen this film, what's your take? If not, please go see this film. All this philosophy stuff is fun to talk about, but even without an ounce of over-analysis, this film can be enjoyed on all the levels, as a sci-fi film, as a horror, as a drama. It just works, and it's gorgeous. Please go see it so these types of films will get made. If not, I'll be really, really sad, and I'd probably just walk into the Shimmer. Once again, thank you all so much for watching. Please like and subscribe, and turn on that notification button if you want to see more videos and analyses from me. Thank you all, and I'll see you all next time.
Something's come through the fence. Through the fence? I can't see anything. Yeah, neither can I.